Hey guys, gals, and music pals, it's Miss Thrift-Winch back to read some more composer stories. Today we're looking at Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Yes, his name was Wolfgang. This is some of his music that you're hearing right now, and you probably recognize this tune because it's been used all over the place. I'm trying to think of where this tune was covered, and it's not coming to my brain, but I know it's been used in other places, so. We're back in with Lives of the Musicians by Kathleen Curl and Catherine Hewitt. And this is for educational purposes only. Alright. So, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, he was born in Salzburg, Austria in 1756, and he died in Vienna, Austria in 1791. It says he was an Austrian composer who in his short life wrote many masterpieces, including symphonies, operas such as The Magic Flute and Don Giovanni, and piano music. He also wrote concertos for several different instruments, including for the flute. One of the first big pieces of music I had to play when I was in college was Mozart's Concerto in G major. And it was really, really hard. And it took a lot of practice. Until he was 3, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was an ordinary baby. Then he began climbing on the bench and imitating the clavier playing of his talented older sister, Maria Anna. At age 4, he made up his own compositions and studied violin. He insisted that all his activities be accompanied by music. His father noticed that it was difficult to teach him music. He seemed to know everything already. By the time he was 5, he would stay up late, practicing by candlelight. The next year, 6-year-old Mozart went on tour, traveling by stagecoach all around the bumpy roads of Europe. From all of his travels, Mozart eventually learned to speak 15 languages. He played for royalty, for the well-known musicians of the day. At 7, he proposed marriage to Marie Antoinette, the future Queen of France. At 8, he was composing symphonies, and at 11, he composed his first opera. When composing, Mozart wore an apron to keep the ink off his clothes. He wore little velvet coats with lace ruffles and gold embroidery and a little gold sword at his side. He was known then as the most kissed little boy in Europe. Today, we think of him as the greatest musical prodigy who ever lived. Mozart was a strange and Mozart had a strange and exhausting childhood. He was so often ill that some people worried about how much longer he would live. He was sweet and affectionate, most anxious to please. His special talent meant he never had to go to school. His father gave him lessons. Mozart especially liked arithmetic, which is math, and he covered tablecloths and walls with rows of figures, numbers. Mozart loved animals. He sent the family dog, a terrier named Bimperl, greetings from cities all over Europe. In London, he broke off a concert to run after a cat that had wandered in. That sounds like me. Later in life, he owned 2 other dogs, Gockerl and Catherall, a pet grasshopper, and various birds. As a child, Mozart was cute, with rosy cheeks and bright eyes. As an adult, though, his skin was yellowish, scarred with smallpox, and his blue eyes were bulgy. He was short and thin, and his head was too big for his body. Yet he was concerned about his appearance. He took care to have elegant clothes, and he had a barber work on his hair much more often than most people did. Mozart fell madly in love with Aloud Weber, cousin of composer Karl Maria von Weber. Some people pronounce it Weber. Anyway, this was his landlady's daughter, but she rejected him, and he married Constance Weber, her sister. Constance was like Mozart in many ways. Musical, not especially attractive, he called her Little Mouse, and playful. They had 6 children, but only 2 lived to be adults. Music was the one thing that made Mozart's face light up. He usually woke up at 6, composed till 9, gave music lessons till 1, though he didn't enjoy teaching, and then had lunch at someone's house, where he had to entertain his hosts. Then, unless there was a concert to attend, he composed far into the night. He could get by on as little as 4 hours sleep. I couldn't do it. Doctors told him he needed to get more regular recreation, that's exercise, which may be why he eventually bought a pool table. I've never thought of pool as exercise. Not like swimming pool. It's a table and you use sticks and hit the little cue balls? Cue balls around. He wrote music more quickly than almost any other composer in history, and he sometimes put things off until the very last minute. Same. If he had to work through the night, Constance would tell him tales about Cinderella or Aladdin to keep him awake. His best ideas came when he was in a good mood, alone, and undisturbed. "What a delight this is, I cannot tell," he once wrote. "All this inventing, this producing, takes place in a pleasing, lively dream." He could write down his ideas at meals. He liked liver dumplings and sauerkraut, while gossiping with friends, and even while playing pool. Once he held his wife's hand while she was having a baby, and with his other hand wrote several pieces of music. One day, a visitor found Mozart and his wife dancing in their house, and Mozart explained that they had run out of firewood and were trying to stay warm. Mozart spent money faster than he could earn it, and he was always in debt. Part of the problem was that aristocrats paid him for music with things like watches and snuff boxes, not the cash that he needed to live on. A letter that he wrote asking for a loan sold 200 years later for 100 times the amount he had requested. There were plenty of people who didn't like Mozart. They thought he was rude, immature, and irresponsible. One person who knew Mozart well said that she never heard him say one serious thing. He could be impatient with people who were not as bright as he was. Although his father was always bombarding him with advice on how to make money and meet the right people, Mozart had trouble finding and keeping jobs. Once he lost a court appointment by being obnoxious and got himself literally kicked out of court. This isn't like legal court. This is the royal court. Sorry about the door. Luke was crawling into his room.
Oh boy.
He scared me. Once he lost a court appointment by being obnoxious and got himself literally kicked out of court. "There's the door. I will have nothing more to do with such a villain," said the man who fired him. Mozart was scared of ghosts. That's what I thought Luke was a minute ago. And loud noises, and he was superstitious, which explains his reaction to the tall, mysterious stranger who came to his house one night. Dressed all in gray, the stranger commissioned him to write a requiem, or funeral mass. The stranger would never give his name, but kept nagging Mozart to finish. Fearful and convinced somehow that he was writing his own burial music, Mozart worked feverishly. Eventually, the stranger was revealed to be a messenger from an eccentric count, who had a habit of having well-known composers write something he could pass off as his own in private performances. Rude. But by that time, Mozart had died of kidney failure and malnutrition. Mozart had spent 14 years of his short life on the road, and he had never been very healthy. He was only 35 when he died. Some people feel that fear of the stranger hastened his death. I could imagine that. Plays, operas, and movies have been written about the theory that he was poisoned by rival composer Antonio Salieri. But this rumor has never been proven. At the peak of his career, Mozart earned as much money in one concert as his father earned in a year. Yet at the time of his death, he owned very little. He had 6 coats, 5 red, his favorite color, and 1 white for court, 3 silver spoons, and 346 books. His most expensive possessions were his walnut piano and his pool table. And in his musical notes, it says Mozart was unhappy with the way one of his singers responded when she was called on to shriek in the opera Don Giovanni. So he was wanting her to yell, and she wasn't doing it the way he wanted. One day, he crept up behind her and grabbed her at exactly the right moment. She gave him just the shriek he wanted. One of Mozart's most famous light-hearted compositions is the String Serenade. Yeah, that would be the word serenade. I can't read. But I can read this part. Ein kleine Nachtmusik. I can read that. Which is a little night music, written 2 months after his father died and as Mozart was recovering from a serious illness. I've had to sing a little night music before. It's very, very pretty. The Piano Concerto No. 21 is now known as Elvira Madigan. not after a friend of Mozart's, but after a 20th century movie that used this as its theme song. Most recordings of Mozart's music are bought today. Rewind. More recordings of Mozart's music are bought today than recordings of any other composer's work. And to play all of Mozart's music in a row would take 202 hours. That's almost 8.5 days. That's a lot. So, tomorrow is Friday the 20th, and it'll be the last day of the week for our composer stories, and we'll be reading about Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven. I'm doing better with this German than I thought I would. Anybody who actually speaks German probably wants to smack me, though. I probably am not pronouncing things the way they like. But we'll read about Beethoven on Friday. I hope everybody got outside, or at least got to open your windows today. I know I put my plants outside, and they've been out to get a lot of sun, and they've warmed up really nicely, and we opened some windows. I hope everybody is doing their best work on their e-learning, but I hope you're spending time with your family if you're able. I hope you are staying happy and healthy, and just know that we miss you guys. We are so ready to be back at school just like you are. And we're just going to keep taking it one day at a time. So, till tomorrow. Bye guys, gals, and music pals.